Hi, welcome to this paper 2 overview of the AQA A-Level Sociology exam. Today I'm going to look at sort of the global development section. I am the sociology guy. You can follow me on Twitter at the sociology guy. You can also follow me on Instagram, the sociology guy, and you can look at my website, which is thesociologyguide.com. On there, I've got lots of free revision resources, mind maps, knowledge organizers, exam tips, checklists, model answers. Today we're going to look at sort of like some of the content that's been on global development over the last sort of like 4 papers that we've had, 2 specimen papers and 2 real papers in June 2017 and June 2018. Just a quick disclaimer, I have absolutely no knowledge of what is going to be on the exams on June the 4th. I've got no knowledge of them at all. Any of the questions or items that I create for these videos are made by me. They're not made by AQA. They follow very similar question types. But what I do is I pick question types that have not appeared on the specimen papers or in the AS or A-level exams up until June 2019. My reasoning behind that is that lots of students will practice doing past papers. They will get past papers as their mock exams or as their kind of like end of term assessments. So they may have answered questions that have already been asked, but they may not be aware of the other different types of questions that can be asked. So what I do is I will take some of my knowledge of sociology, and I will create a new question to help students so that if they see a question that is similar to that, they won't be surprised come the exam. The essay structure I use is only one way of answering the question. Other approaches may still get full marks. And what I'm doing is, this is not a prediction. Okay, what I'm doing is I'm just trying to prepare you for questions that you may not have practiced in the past. So let's have a quick look at the specification for global development. What students need to know is they need to know about development, underdevelopment, and global inequality. So you need to have an understanding of that. Development being good change, underdevelopment meaning sort of like that nations haven't quite proceeded the way they should have. And of course, global inequality is the division between the rich nations and the poor nations. Globalization has influence on the cultural, political, and economic relationships between societies. So we look at cultural globalization, political globalization, economic globalization. We look at some of the agencies that run through those: international governmental organizations, non-governmental organizations, TNCs, and what are the impact of those. We also look at the role of transnational corporations, NGOs, and IGOs in local and global strategies for development, and you will look at them from both a modernization perspective, a neoliberal perspective, and also a Marxist perspective. We also have to look at development in relation to aid and trade. Is aid a good thing? Is aid a bad thing? Does aid create debt? Is trade a preferable way? Who gets the advantages from trade? Industrialization, urbanization, the environment, and war and conflict. And also look at some of the little aspects of development, things like employment, education, health, demographic change, and gender need to be sort of like examined on there. So I'm going to Okay, so we're going to look at the format of the exams. The first question you will get on section B2, which is global development, is a 10-mark outline and explain. It will show how 2 different parts of the specification are linked. So, for example, you could get one part of the specification could be something like the role of transnational corporations and then how that impacts on employment. You could get one, I think has been asked already, about aid and about gender differences. So it's 2 different spec points and how they are linked. You've got to make the links between those. The 10-mark applying it from the item and analyze question is the second one. You will get an item. There'll be 2 or 3 hooks in it. You need to reference the hooks. You need to just put afterwards item A, put it in quotation marks, put it in as seen in item A. You need to put those in. If you don't put those in, if you're not referring to the material that is in the item, the maximum you will get out is 3 out of 10. The reason being is this question is testing your application skills. So when you're given some information, how can you use it? Okay. And then finally, the 20-mark question is a contribution of a theory. That's one type of question you could get, or you could also get a debate. As well as contribution of a theory, you could also get a contribution of an agency, so something like an IGO, an NGO, or a TNC to the role of development. Just looking at some of the debates. There's quite a few there. One of the debates which has been asked already, which is why do poor nations remain poor? It seems like it's a Marxist kind of argument, a dependency theorist argument, but also you can look at neoliberalism and you can look at modernization theory or functionalism in there as well. What is better for development, aid or trade? That is one that they've asked quite a lot in the past. Certainly on the old spec, it seemed to be a big question, and it was a tough question for students, this idea of aid and trade and which is better. What role do IGOs and NGOs play in development? So what role do international governmental organizations like the IMF, the World Bank, and the World Trade Organization, what role do they play in development versus non-governmental organizations? So things like UNICEF, UNICEF, some of the charities that are in the developing world as well, WaterAid, people like that. On the other side, so they've got our Western models of health and education the best fit for developing countries. Obviously, our modernization argument, that sort of like says the West is best. Whereas dependency theorists think that that's a form of cultural imperialism and it's just spreading capitalism. So, but some approaches will say that taking on Western models of health and education, teaching sort of kids in the developing world the British curriculum or the American curriculum is a good thing because it helps them to develop their skills. Whereas our dependency theorists, they may argue that actually what we're doing is we're just setting up TNCs, we're giving TNCs money to set up and to spread their market across the world. What causes conflicts and what are the impacts of these conflicts for development? So you could get, conflict is one of the reasons for conflict is underdevelopment. You could get one of the reasons for conflict is poverty. You can also then talk about what is the impacts of conflicts of development. So what does conflict do to stop the process of development? So destruction of the infrastructure, halting education, the way in which women are treated sort of like as they are more likely to be the victims of conflict than anybody else. Next question is, next debate is really the impact of urbanization and industrialization and how that may potentially impact on the environment. There's another one that I've missed out there. Will the needs of economic development always take precedence over the environment? That's another kind of key debate. And how does development affect gender differences? There are some of the key debates in global development that you need to be aware of. So let's look at some of the questions. On the specimen paper 1, 2 ways TNCs may affect employment in the developing world. Of course, quite straightforward. Well, TNCs may employ people and they may give them skills, but they may also drive local farmers and local businesses out of employment. They can also make employment more formal, so people are actually getting paid cash wages. They may get some holidays, they may get sort of like better health and safety, better legislation around health and safety, maybe. The next question there, apply and analyze 2 reasons why NGOs may be more effective than governments in the process of development. So you're looking at things like NGOs being more mobile, they may have more connections on the ground, they're able to sort of like get through red tape a lot quicker. The evaluate question on that was conflicts in poor countries are caused by the lack of development, which is what I mentioned a minute ago. So you've got one idea that conflict is caused by poverty versus the idea that conflict is caused by sort of like kind of neoliberal economics and the spread of capitalism. Specimen 2. 2 ways education helps the process of industrialization. Okay, so teaching skills, passing on Western values. 2 ways women are disadvantaged in the process of development. So you could talk about a lot of aid money going to males, although there are some micro schemes that target women in the developing world. We can talk about sort of like the process sort of like of westernization means that women, if they adopt Western values, could then be in conflict with their traditional cultures. Evaluate question, the view that the poor will always be poor. That essentially is a question which is modernization versus dependency versus neoliberal. Our dependency theorists are going to say yes, they are always going to be poor unless they manage to break away from this state of dependency. Modernization will say, well, they won't be poor if they adopt Western ideas, and neoliberals will sort of like say, well, they won't be poor if they adopt free trade policies. In June 2017, again 3 questions. The first one outline and explain 2 ways development may affect health chances. So it can be things like moving into cities and sort of like the spread of diseases through the growth of what we call megacities. in terms of urbanization. You can also talk about two ways development can affect health chances. So bringing in sort of like things like NGOs and bringing in clean water, irrigation systems. Two ways in which industrialization may affect the environment: air pollution, water pollution, species extinction, deforestation, lots of different ways there. The contribution of NGOs to the development process. Okay, bit of a tricky question, that one, but what you would argue is that a lot of NGOs sort of like will contribute to helping development, and then you might evaluate that with some of the ways in which NGOs benefit from things like aid, some of the ways in which NGOs actually serve the interests of capitalism by passing on Western ideals, how some NGOs with ideas, particularly sort of like ideas of Christianity, may cause conflict within regions. June 2018, two ways in which aid may affect gender inequalities. So two ways aid may affect gender inequalities is very similar to a question we've asked before. So answered before, which is the idea that sort of like aid, if it's given to males, may actually reinforce gender inequalities, or aid, if it is given to females, may do the opposite, where it may be challenging traditional cultures. Two ways globalization might bring about cultural change in developing countries. So the passing on of Western ideals, the passing on of capitalism, turning countries into consumers rather than producers. And then the 20 marker last year was dependency theories of development and underdevelopment, which is the ideas of Andrew Gunder Frank. And then what you might do is you might evaluate that with some of the modernization theories as well. Like Rostow. So what's not appeared? Again, the 10 markers are very, very difficult to actually sort of like say what has not appeared on there. So what I'm going to do is going to try and set up some links between those. So what we'll do is a one-page spread, and I will look at global development, and I will say, right, okay, aid. How does aid impact on gender? How does aid impact on education? How does aid impact on industrialization? For the 20 markers, there's a lot of essays that could potentially come up here. A lot of essays that could come up. They've not asked any 20 mark questions on aid and trade, which I think is a really big part and really important part of it. So that is one of the essays I'm going to look at. They've not asked a specific 20 marker on modernization or neoliberal theories, two of the big theories that are in there. They've asked one on dependency. We could argue that the poor will always remain poor is essentially a theory question. And I think they are a little bit more straightforward, those questions. You could quite easily do modernization of neoliberal theories. Population and consumption. Now, population and consumption has not been mentioned anywhere on this. So the ideas of either neo-Malthusians, and the idea is that there is going to be scarcity versus the kind of Marxist idea, well, actually, there's enough if we all have our fair share. Role of international governmental organisations, or the role of TNCs, they have both been asked as big questions in the past. For me, I would probably look to sort of look at the role of TNCs as a question, and sort of see the benefits versus the costs of transnational corporations, because that's quite a wide one. So the two essays I would probably look at doing from this one is aid and trade and the role of TNCs. But as you can see, with this paper, with the amount of content that could potentially be 20 markers, it's very, very difficult to predict with any degree of certainty sort of like what's going to come up. What I would sort of suggest to students, and I always suggest, is look at a very holistic view of this paper. You need to know the topics at A2 tend to be more interwoven than, say, for example, something like education, which can be a little bit fragmented in places. Hopefully this has helped. I will put up some more stuff for global development. I know there's not too many people do global development, and therefore there's not too many resources on it. I do have a couple of videos on dependency theory, modernization theory, world systems theory on my website as well, if you want to have a look at those. Okay, thanks for watching. Goodbye.